So, I mean, you see a lot of companies greenwashing, which is like, portraying themselves as more environmentally conscious than they really are. Brands that come to mind are like H&M and like their conscious collection. And then you see like pictures of, the deserts in Chile and other countries, which are just like, pits of, unused clothing. So I think the environmental movement is an interesting one because it's kind of been co-opted by like the white elite. And I don't know, the way that I came into sustainability is very different than other people came into sustainability.
How'd you come into sustainability?
Yeah. So, it always comes from an immigrant experience, right? Now, I think that there was a lot of things that brought me to the environmental sciences. One of my earliest memories of education is actually like watching videos of the Amazon being cut down. Like I remember being like first grade and watching a video about deforestation, and they made us write letters to like President Bush, and I was like, please save the trees. Like I, as a first grader, was like, how do I spell trees? But like this was an important like fact to me. And then, so my father is from a village in Egypt, and he's from a rural village, farmed. That's how they sustain themselves. So one summer in 2006 or 7, we went back, and I spent the entire summer there, and we cultivated the land with my cousins, and they talked about the importance of the Nile. And obviously everyone knows about the importance of the Nile. It's like the epicenter of Egyptian life. Like it is what, allowed Egypt to exist and become an empire. But the way that they were treating the Nile was crazy. They were dumping sewage. Like literally, I remember walking, and I was like, oh, I'm done with like a can of soda. And I was like, oh, like, let me know when we see a trash can. And he chucked it into the river. And I was like, oh, okay. And then obviously as I got older, I started realizing like if we don't do something, you're putting like our futures at risk, our children's futures at risk. This isn't like, I think people are really afraid to talk about the effects of climate change because they realize it's so real and it's imminent, and we don't have all the solutions. And it's not gonna, it's not gonna affect one person. There's no way you can stop it. So I think people are afraid to talk about things that scare them, and that's why people shy away from it. Also, at least my opinion of the environment, like I understand it's really important. It's something that I'm pursuing both like professionally and, I like to talk about it in my social circles. But I do understand that when people are of low socioeconomic classes or, have like health problems, like the last thing they're thinking about is the environment. It's a luxury to them. And I can understand that. And so I think like when we talk about the environment, we need to stop talking about it in like this, like in its own sphere. It really is encompassing of like socioeconomic problems as well. It's encompassing of health related, like public health. People don't talk about the environment being a public health problem. Like, how is that not a problem? My favorite thing to talk about is walkable cities, which is why I moved to Chicago, or a major city in general. Like the effects walking has on, obesity rates, mental health clarity, like it's crazy. So like the environment is very interdisciplinary, and we don't talk about it in an interdisciplinary manner. We just talk about it like, oh, save the turtles. Like it's not as, just don't use straws. So I think, I like pivoted into like several topics, but ultimately it's not in its own sphere, and the greenwashing makes it seem as if though like if we buy, this thing that is made of like ethical materials, that's oh great, but what's better is like lessen your consumption. Reduce will always be the best action before recycling or buying things that are of recycled material. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I think you brought up a lot of great points.
Mm-hmm.
I can even start back from the story of, was it your cousin that threw the can in the Nile?
Yeah.
Yeah, so in Pakistan, for example, right? You can go on, Karachi, the biggest city in Pakistan, you can go into very nice, clean parts and not see any trash. And then you can go to, more middle class, lower class neighborhoods and just see piles of trash on the side of the street, right? And growing up, I was just like, oh, Pakistan is dirty. They don't know what they're doing. And that was me being ignorant because obviously in the US, we have this system of, oh, we put our trash in the trash can and then it magically disappears. Like, where does it go, right?
Yeah.
But when you start learning about, oh, this whole area here on the map is a landfill. And then it's like, well, what is a landfill? I wasn't taught was what a landfill was. Starting from like second or third grade, all students should take a field trip to the landfill and just say like, hey, all that trash you throw in the trash can, this is where it all ends up. Because it doesn't just magically disappear. It goes somewhere, and some items they'll be in the landfill for decades, just rotting and burning, and sometimes it doesn't even disappear because there's some materials that don't decompose exactly. So that's kind of what was going through my head when you were drawing that analogy. Like, if it's not going in the river, it's going in the landfill. And then even with your connection to elitism or just corporatization of it, it goes back to consumption. Because if you say, hey, this is ethical, or this can be recycled, or we're being responsible because we recognize the need to be more environmentally friendly and sustainable. If there's that push there, then it makes me feel better at the end of the day that, oh yeah, maybe I do know about the landfill, but because there's this green sticker on here that I can just put in the recycle bin, I'm good, and then it's just going to get reused. But it's most of the time isn't, was what I hear.
Yeah, no one knows where their trash goes. I mean, like, third grade is great. I didn't go to a landfill. I mean, have I been to a landfill? Yes, I've been to a landfill. But I wasn't until college, like when I was studying the environment, that they were like, oh, let's go see where our trash goes. And if I hadn't taken that class, I would have never seen it.
Yeah.
Another thing is, like, no one knows where our, like, water, like gray water, dirty water goes. No one knows where our clean water comes from. So I think there's a lot of, like, caveats that are fractured within everyone's understanding of, like, how their own cities work and how the environment works. Like, our education is not comprehensive when it comes to teaching, and I think this is like it. I mean, I'm not trying to say that biology is not important. I definitely, we're all organisms, so, like, of course. But I think it's just as important to talk about, like, where we live. Like, it affects everyone. It's not, and so I don't know how it is in, different states, but, like, my education, like, earth and environmental science was something you took in 9th grade, and it wasn't really, like, you talked about the soil, which is great. Like, I definitely think earth sciences are part of, like, it's important to know. But I think that there needs to be a greater emphasis, especially, in coming generations, of how we are affecting our lived spaces, our environments, because ultimately, like, climate change is not happening because of anyone besides humans. And I think, like, we are, because we are the ones that have created this problem, we are responsible for fixing it. Because once again, it's not like we're not the only ones that inhabit the earth. So yeah, it's our responsibility.
Is there strong enough evidence to suggest that humans are the cause?
Yeah. So like 70% of emissions or climate change and CO2 emissions can be traced to 100 companies over the last, like, 200 years. Like, the evidence is there. Like, and we live in the second largest polluter, and probably the largest if you look at it from, like, not just this century, but, like, since the Industrial Revolution. China right now is beating us out, but also everything is manufactured in China. And
they have, like, triple, quadruple the amount of people,
too. And even more than that, like you mentioned, they're more densely populated. And when you look at, like, a person by person, Americans are the most, they release the most CO2 emissions per person.